Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are around the world, around the country. Welcome to another episode of the Silk Stocking Sisters podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Theresa J. Canada, and today I have a special guest because, as you know, all my guests are special. And we have today a guest, Dr. Elaine Ruiz López.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. Really, this is an honor, absolute honor. And the other thing is, people, we have something in connection. We come from the same generational kinds of things. We have backgrounds in terms of education. But believe me, Dr. Lopez is excellent. She's supreme. Okay. And I can't wait to have her talk about her experience. So let me first give the brief background on Dr. Elaine Ruiz Lopez. She was born in the South Bronx when it was still a haven for hardworking Puerto Rican families. By her adolescence, it had devolved into an urban battleground marked by destruction, narcotics, violence, and indifference from those in power. As a teenage mother, the public school system dismissed her potential, although intellectually gifted. But through fierce resolve, and I believe that's true, she found her way into college to study bilingual education at City College of New York and later graduated with a doctorate from Columbia University Teachers College. Dr. Ruiz López could have turned her back on the ashes of her youth. She could have done that, but she didn't. Instead, in the 80s and 1980s, she returned home to the South Bronx as a bilingual education teacher, walking through the streets filled with rubble, confronting racism, and administrators content with continual failure. In her book, she chronicles her passion for justice that led her to advocate and fight for bilingual education and to work alongside parents and activists that led her to advocate and fight for bilingual education and to work alongside parents and activists to oppose the English-only movement, which I'm completely aware of. In 2006, she opened the first charter high school college prep in the Bronx. And you all know Bronx is in New York City, okay? For 2 decades, the International Leadership Charter High School has been a safe haven where all immigrant students thrive and their language and culture are respected and valued, which is very important. Along the way, Dr. Ruiz Lopez has been labeled as an angry Puerto Rican woman and rebellious. Why do I think that's the case? But she's not, but that's what you have to do, right? But this persistent educator and leader embodies the stubborn resolve and determination of her people. Educational equity is possible in the Bronx and throughout the country. In her book, The Fight for Equity in the Bronx, Changing Lives and Transforming Communities One Scholar at a Time, is the story of one Puerto Rican woman's fight to defy the low expectations set for immigrant communities and crafting a new Bronx narrative filled with dignity, voice, and power. Her alumni are testimony to her vision that all can succeed. And I agree. Thank you so much for being here.
It's my privilege and honor. Thank you for the invitation, Dr. Canada.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you to cover a couple of topics. One, let's start off with your decision to write The Fight for Equity in the Bronx and a message you hope readers take away from the book.
Well, the initial inspiration for writing my memoir, essentially, that would include my journey towards starting the first charter high school in the Bronx in 2006, it came from a strong desire to tell my story and to unmask a lot of the issues and battles that Puerto Rican women of color have experienced on their journeys to pursuing a higher education, as well as improving and advocating for the lives of others. So in 2022, I was approached by Forbes Books and out of the blue And although I had already been thinking about writing a book, and I had actually outlined what would become later the first three chapters of my book, I did so during the pandemic in 2020. But in 2022, I was approached and I was invited, right, to
Right.
partner with them in writing this book. And so that's how the that's the genesis of how the book came to be. So I started writing in 2022 and I completed the book in about 14 months or so, and it was released
Fantastic.
in June of 2024. I certainly had a lot to say, and I was committed to telling the story, not only my story, but also sharing the story of other young women like me, other Elaines that were born and raised in the South Bronx or in other similar neighborhoods, and the challenges that you face when you are being raised in a community that's marginalized, um, that a community where, the school system has low expectations for you because of the color of your skin or the language that you
Languages.
speak.
Mhm.
I wanted to also, pay tribute to the leaders in the community and activists that I came across along the way, because we all know that we never get to where we are without others. So I'm standing on the shoulders of many, heroes
Mhm.
uh, of the
Absolutely.
community,
Absolutely.
that inspired me and influenced me to become, active in the community, become a community activist, become an education activist, and ultimately advocating for bilingual education and opposing the English only movement while simultaneously pursuing my higher education degrees.
Yes.
So I also it was also a catharsis for me in many ways, because I had you know, uh, so many memories of traumatic incidents, because I do describe myself whenever I'm speaking, I do openly share that I'm an adult survivor of trauma,
Mhm.
right? Not only raised in a community where there was a lot of violence, drugs, and also, in my case, I was born in the South Bronx on Simpson Street,
Oh,
yeah,
yes.
three buildings on Simpson Street,
Yes.
and the public school that I attended was right across the street to the 41st precinct that later became,
Wow.
infamous
Yes.
as part of this Tom Walker's book, Fort Apache.
Yes. We're back.
So Fort Apache, and what was described in in the book and in the movie, I didn't know as a child attending PS20 that later I would become part of a large group of community activists that would protest that movie uh,
Oh,
due
really?
to depict the depiction of racism and how, Puerto Rican women and men were being depicted as being prostitutes, dealers,
Negative images.
suicidal.
Yeah.
So later then that's later, right?
Right.
That's
Right. Right. Right.
in the late 70s, early 80s. That's when now I'm teaching at that point, right?
Yes.
And I am witnessing and experiencing as a young teacher in the community. Also, I'm experiencing racism
Mhm.
from my colleagues, from other white teachers,
Mhm.
and principals in the school system. So, but going back to the question on what inspired me to write this book, I believe that I had a story to tell, and that it would resonate with many women and men
Yes. Yes.
who
Yes.
may have who may have had similar experiences, and it's also I wanted to also share that despite the beginnings, right? Despite the beginnings, and despite you know I'm the daughter of first generation Puerto Rican. Both of my parents traveled from Puerto Rico in the 50s during Operation Bootstrap. And
What people? No,
it
no.
was
Hold it a second. Tell the audience what's Operation Bootstrap. They may not know.
Operation Bootstrap was a government initiative in Puerto Rico that was, developed, in I guess in collaboration with the United States government. That it was during there was a depression, the economic depression, and there was an incentive made for Puerto Ricans to leave their island and come to the United States, presumably for greater opportunities and a better life, only to, you know, um, find that not only were they uprooted from their beautiful tropical island,
Yes.
but
Yes.
now they have to suffer through, if you could imagine, coming from Puerto Rico and go and suffering through these snowstorms, looking for work, looking for a place to live, you know, in a context that was, if we could just imagine 1950s, if you look at you look at the timeline, right, of when Puerto Ricans came to the United States or to New York City specifically,
Specifically New York City.
it, there was a lot going on in the 50s,
Oh
right?
yeah, absolutely.
There was schools were still segregated
That's right.
in the South. There were still lynchings taking place, so this whole you know um, negative stereotype of Puerto Ricans and how then we were treated, and I have early memories, and my mother, a mulata woman who is of African ancestry. It didn't get lost on me, how she was being
Suffer through
looked
that.
at and how she
Suffer through
was
that.
being treated
Yeah.
and what have you. So, in fact, in my book, I write about, the story that she shared with me when I was born and how, I was born at the old Lincoln Hospital, which got the reputation of being the butcher shop.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Um,
In the Bronx. That's
that
right. That's right.
yeah, and at that hospital, which was, by the way, formerly, the name of the hospital was the Hospital for Colored People, or the Hospital for the Colored.
Mhm.
And it was very interesting because my mother shares with me, and I document this in my book,
People have to
that
read the book, folks. Read the book.
when I was born, um, a nurse at Lincoln Hospital gave me to a white woman
Because she figured
and
that was
gave
not your
my
mother.
and gave my mother
They went
a
out to the
baby
child.
that was closer to her
Right.
complexion, right?
Right.
A darker baby,
Right.
right? And of course, my mother recalls what I looked like, and she started, screaming and fighting, and eventually, I was given back to my mama.
But see, just
But
just just
yes,
hearing that people need to understand. This is why I have people on to talk about real life experiences, and they don't understand. Well, this is something you make. No, this is not made up. This is the reality. Okay, and how
yes,
it impacts
yes.
individuals and society as a whole, and how so people need to learn and understand the history.
Yes, no, absolutely. So, and it's also didn't get lost on me that in, when I was 13 or 14, I believe it was 1970, when the Young Lords then took over Lincoln Hospital and began, opening up mobile clinics, in the
Yes,
South
yes,
Bronx,
yes.
on the perimeter of Lincoln Hospital, because of not only the poor substandard quality of health care, for people of color and Puerto Ricans and African Americans, right? But also that there were many women who were dying in childbirth at this hospital. And then then it was eventually closed, of course, and then the new Lincoln Hospital was opened on 149th Street off of the Grand Concourse. So that and that is, I've mentioned a few reasons why I decided that my story needed to be told. Not because I thought it was a unique story,
No,
by the
because
way.
it's not unique, but
It's not unique,
but it's your uniqueness.
but it's my uniqueness and it's my story.
That's it.
And the fact that then, in my teen years, I became a teenage mom.
Yeah.
I became a teenage mom at the age of 16 and was still attending high school, only to be pushed out of high school. Although I was told I had great potential when I was in elementary school because I was always in these gifted and talented classes.
You could read, you could, but this was not expected. And so
It was that, yeah. So I was pushed out of high school, and fast forward, I made a decision that I was going to sign myself out of high school and find a general education diploma, a GED program. And I did that, and I wound up completing that before my graduating class graduated, and then found my way to City College of New York, which is where it all started for me.
well, then, you've already covered the second aspect of the discussion, like the barriers you overcame growing up as a Puerto Rican in the South Bronx and how those experiences shaped your leadership. So that has covered a lot right there. Now let's look at the role. You talked a little bit about the role education has played in your life and expanding the opportunities for other Latinas in New York City over the years that you've been in education.
Yes. So I was very fortunate to meet community women who were community activists and leaders fighting for quality education for the Puerto Rican children in New York specifically. And that is Dr. Evelina Antonetti, who is the founder of United Bronx Parents, as well as Dr. Antonia Pantoja, a Puerto Rican woman that has a social work background, who had a social work background. Both of these, the Shiros are deceased now.
Yes, I know.
And so Dr. Pantoja was also the founder of ASPIRA.
Oh, really?
The founder of
Right.
ASPIRA.
Yeah.
And so these two, I highlight these two women.
We have to educate people here. Please give the audience what ASPIRA stands for. If you can remember. I knew part
Well,
of it.
aspira in Spanish means to aspire, right? To have aspirations, whether that's aspiration. And in this context, it was to aspire to excel in school and go on to college,
Right.
and to become, and give back to your community, So Antonia Pantoja also was the founder of Boricua College. She was one of the co-founders there.
Yeah.
And so it was it was the hard work and dedication and sacrifice of these two women that then gave us bilingual education. Particularly, Dr. Antonia Pantoja. They would both, they partnered up and would, testify at Senate hearings. I write about this in my book as well.
Right.
And
how it was a struggle. They want to eliminate.
It was a struggle.
Yeah, it's a struggle.
And because now we're talking about it's 1970, and Puerto Rican children were languishing in schools. They were failing, and the school system um, uh, believed that it was their fault and would blame the victim and not provide the resources and the services that were needed, in order for children to succeed. So they were fighting for to legislate, um, the provisions that would provide bilingual education, and they became successful. And in by the 1970s, Antonia Pantoja and others were beginning to consider legal strategies, you know, um, to achieve this goal. And so, with the help of the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund, they filed lawsuits against the Board of Education in 1972. And in October 22nd of 1972, 76, won the case on October 22nd. And the Supreme Court case, Brown versus Board of Education, set the precedence, right, for this enormous win as well. And this also resonated greatly with the African American community, because the African American community was very familiar with the fact that during that time, it was after a decade, of after Brown versus Board of Education, the school systems continually failed, as you know,
Yes.
to
Yes.
implement
Yes.
a desegregation
Right.
in
Right.
schools.
Right. Right.
So this also set the precedent for what was called the ASPIRA consent decree after ASPIRA, because it was ASPIRA as an organization
Right.
that sued, the Board of Education, along with the support of the Puerto Rican Legal Defense and Education Fund. So today, there are over 170 language groups that benefit from the ASPIRA consent decree, as well as other federal legislation to protect the educational needs and that mandate resources and services for students whose first language is not English.
So thank you, everybody, for being able to listen and to this podcast and participating and supporting the channel. And we'll see you next time in another episode of the Still Stocking Sisters podcast. Have a good day, everybody.